Welcome to the MLHS podcast, episode 97. I'm Nick Ashbourne, joined as always by Anthony Petrielli. We are a little bit late to the off-season in review podcast time. I was away, then Anthony was away. The schedules did not line up. I thought that it might be sort of a mixed blessing and they would do something between July 1st and now such that like we actually came in at the perfect time. That's not really the case, but we're going to go through the moves that they have made and sort of where they sit and how we feel about it.
We're also recording before Friday, which is when the Leafs love to drop news. So I might be kicking myself in about 24 hours is the absolute dumbest time to record a podcast about the Toronto Maple Leafs. But you know,
It's a
them the
hundred. It is
breaks.
100% conceivable. It is 100% conceivable. Um, we have to start with the Mitch Marner trading of the rights. We have on this podcast talked a lot about Marner and his exit and his time in Toronto, and I'm sure there'll be some of that perhaps at the end. But that's not
Gonna
the
try my
goal.
best. Don't
That's
want the conversation to go off the rails. Gonna try my best not to talk about Marner until the very end.
Yeah, we're going to keep some guardrails on it at the very beginning, at least, and talk about what they are getting in Nick Roy, who is an interesting return for rights. You don't normally see really a notable return of any kind. This is a big center, someone who is capable of playing in a number of situations. He played both power play and penalty kill with the Golden Knights. He was largely their fourth line center. You hear a lot of that. I think there's a little bit of Scott Laughton gun shyness in the Leafs fan base where like, oh, this is a fourth line center who we're expecting to be a third line player for us or a significant player for us. I think it's also worth remembering he's behind Eichel, Hurdle, and Carlson with Vegas, so I'm not sure what people wanted from him. Again, this is not me saying he's a superstar by any means, but I think that like 4C label could be his role in the end. Who's to say? It's not 100% locked in, but I think that has a lot to do with who the Vegas Golden Knights were and less to do with who the Maple Leafs are. Anthony, what are your initial thoughts on Nick Roy?
I mean, given the situation at the time, that being about to be a UFA literally a day later, it's like an unprecedented good return. Like, I mean, Carolina the year before got a third round pick for Jake Gensel, and we're talking about a 28-year-old 6'4" right-handed center that has a history in the league. I know you mentioned fourth line center, but I mean, that's not really what he has been. Like when Vegas won the cup, he averaged 15 minutes a night in the playoffs. He played every playoff game. He was eighth among their forwards in ice time. He has 369 NHL games under his belt. He has a cup under his belt. Like he's a legitimate top nine 3C, and he's a proper center, which is really hard to find. I mean, we just saw a UFA market where Christian Dvorak got 5.4 million.
I mean, that
And
was a wild expense. I
I
mean,
think,
the cap's going up, things are changing, but he just the sticker shock on that for me was a lot.
and Was signed for not even 1 year, it's 2 years at an extremely palatable $3 million. So, I mean, we just saw what the Leafs paid for Scott Laughton last year at the deadline. Like, if the Leafs really, if things really went off the rails and they wanted to flip him, I think they'd get a pretty penny in return. Now, I don't think they should. I don't want to go in that rabbit hole of what if them, being bad. I think Brad Treliving has already laid this out for us. He had an interview with Justin Bourne and Nick Kyprios at Sportsnet, and I actually have the quote, so I will just read it out for what it is. I have used the analogy of Winnipeg. No team is perfect, but that is a pretty darn good team that won the President's Trophy. When you look down the middle of the ice, you have Scheifele as the number one. On paper, you have Nemestikov as number two and Lowry as number three. But again, it all comes down to deployment. When you look at our roster now, you have Nick Waugh, who can take a lot of defensive, heavy lifting with defensive zone starts, defensive zone faceoffs, and matchups. When you put those into a pot, it allows you to not necessarily get lost on your one, two, three, but spread out matchups and situational play that could free up different people when we talk about Austin, John, and Scotty Laughton. So a few things there. I mean, he's painted the path forward. We have a proper checking center that can chip in some offense, and this is how we plan to deploy it. The second thing is I would have followed up that quote by him by asking if he actually views Scott Lawton as the 4C. And if he said yes, then I'd say, why did you pay a first round pick for him? Different story. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole as well. I actually think that they should play Scott Lawton and Nick Waugh together on a checking line with Lawton on the wing. I love having a lefty righty, two guys that can play center on a checking line. But like this is a good return, all things considered, and it's going to be a key piece for them. And it's not comparing to Marner. Like we're long past Marner at this point. I'm looking at the team going, all right, well, if you can create a really good checking line with Nick Waugh and it frees up Matthews a little bit more, and you're basically looking at Tavares saying like you're taking offensive zone faceoffs and you're going on the power play, and you have a fourth line, maybe Scott Lawton's on it, maybe David Kampf, maybe somebody else. It's already a little bit deeper, and it's kind of changed the team conceptually right from the hop.
Yeah, I think last year, one of the biggest problems of having a Max Domi centered third line, which wasn't what it always was, but what it was a huge percentage of the time, is that then you felt the need to give that line offensive opportunities, offensive zone starts because you didn't trust it. And then that just put a heavier defensive burden on the Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner line. And so like earlier in Matthews' career, he wasn't buried in the defensive zone nearly as much as he was recently. I know that he has also gotten better defensively over time, but it's partly because the other lines could not be trusted to pick up that slack. And so part of the theory of the case of having Nick Waugh is that you have a guy who, last 3 seasons, no less than 56.7% defensive zone faceoffs at 5-on-5. Now, he isn't actually a good faceoff man, literally, but
But he
you could
generally drives play forward.
yeah, I was going to just bring that up. Like he is an interesting, you don't often see a profile player of often starts in the defensive zone, often loses his faceoffs, drives play positively from a territorial standpoint. Like that's a very odd combination. And that goes to show like the impact that Waugh's made. And again, this is impact in terms of driving the play forward, moving the puck to where it needs to be. It's not scoring a ton of goals. It's not putting up a mass amount of points. He scored between 13 and 15 goals each of the last 4 years. You know what to expect from that perspective, but this is a really good, handy player, as you mentioned, on at this point, a nifty contract. Like when we talked about Scott Lawton being acquired by the Leafs, one of the things we said was you're not just acquiring Scott Lawton, you're acquiring Scott Lawton at a low contract, which makes him a further asset. Now, this isn't about retained money. It's just about the fact that Nick Waugh happens to be on a good contract already. And so having Nick Waugh is one thing, having Nick Waugh on a contract that feels below market at this point with the way the cap is moving makes it even better. So I know
For
it
two
is weird.
years. 2 years.
It's weird to be sort of effusive with praise because again, like you are losing an unbelievably high end player and you are bringing in more of a complementary player, but you got to like the complementary player that they are bringing in. And this is a situation they were in. It's kind of difficult to imagine things going much better. I mean, I know beforehand there's some talk of like, oh, maybe Vegas will want to get rid of William Karlsson in this deal because of it's like, no, that was not going to happen. But this, in terms of the conceivable results, this is near the highest end of outcomes for the Leafs.
Carlson would have been incredible. I think was more than a good enough consolation prize. In the grand scheme of losing Marner, it's not a good return, obviously. But in the scheme of like he's about to walk as a UFA and you just brought back a credible top nine player on a really good contract at a proper age that adds any number of things that were missing from the team. Right-handed center, big, can play well defensively, can chip in some offense. Like, you know, they didn't have a lot of guys that could. They didn't have anybody that could basically do what he did or like what he can bring. So, I'm actually again like I'm separating it from the Marner aspect of it. I'm just saying on Waugh in a fishbowl. I'm actually quite excited for what he brings to the table. And, the way Brad Treliving kind of like laid that out is like that to me opens up so many interesting possibilities because as you look at the lineup, I think one thing we'll eventually circle back on is like, are they going to play Matthews and Nylander together? Like, are they going to load up the top line and say like it's going to be Nylander, Matthews, and Knies? Like Austin Matthews is not going to hurt for line mates just because Mitch Marner left. Like, I think he's going to be okay. Like as long as he's healthy, he's going to be unbelievable. No question in my mind. So if you could build a proper checking line around Waugh, maybe Scott Laughton's there, maybe, I don't know, it could be Bobby McMahon, it could be Kelly Järnkrok, could be any combo of those guys. Matias Maccelli, who we'll get to, played his best hockey in a bit more of a defensive role than people think, alongside Nick Bjugstad and Lawson Krause. So, like, if you could build a line there, that means you could have a really soft scoring line with Tavares, who's no longer, going head to head against, let's say, Sam Bennett anymore. And maybe now it's more going head to head against Anton Lundell and a bit more of an offense versus defense type matchup. Like it does allow you to move things around a little bit. And obviously, what had to happen with Marner going, because it clearly didn't work, is you needed to build three, if not four, proper lines. Whereas for large parts of last year, they had like 1.5 to 2 lines, and the half being like, I didn't really. When Max Domi's on the left wing with Tavares and Nylander, that's 1.5 to me. Like, that's not two good lines. And we talked about it all the time in the spring. Or like Scott Laughton line is their third line. Like that Lorentz, Laughton, Järnkrok line was their third line for pretty much down the stretch and through the playoffs. Like Laughton averaged the most ice time after the big guys last year in the playoffs. Like this isn't like a subjective opinion. Like that was their third line. And it was like none of those guys scored a goal.
Yeah, I mean, I
Like
think you'd hope that Waugh
zero goals.
is the guy who would score a couple of goals, not a ton of goals, but like would have contributed. Like they really could have used him in that playoff run. Um,
Easily.
he would have been a significant factor in the way that they play the game. As you mentioned, like the Leafs have been a two-line team a huge percentage of the time in recent years, and especially last season. And if you lose Marner, good luck creating a better two-line team. Like it's probably not going to happen. So it is about creating a deeper team, and maybe that's part of the idea of potentially having Scott Laughton as the 4C2 is like you feel like you actually have a four-line team. I don't know if they have enough wingers who can make an impact to actually make you feel that way. And we're going to see what happens in the rest of the offseason. Like, it's really hard to project the kind of low third line, fourth line
Yeah.
wing situation with this team right now because it feels like there are more moves to come. But there is a world where the Leafs have four lines that you're like okay with existing and being on the ice. And that would be a very different feeling than one that Leafs fans have experienced in recent years. Waugh can't do that alone, but he's a step in that direction. The next move I think we got to get to here. I mean, I'm lumping these together, but I'm gonna just put the extensions up: Tavares and Knies. And for Tavares, it's 4 years, 4.38. For Knies, it's 6 years, 7.75. It's just a bit of a different vibe than Leafs fans are used to. I think Leafs fans are used to seeing contracts of prominent players and feeling a sense of dread associated with that. And unless you want to correct me here, I think the general consensus is that you feel pretty good about both of these contracts.
Both of those things played out exactly as we laid out in the last episode. I mean, the hoopla around them was ridiculous. Pierre LeBrun was shooting off about $5+ million salary for Tavares, like 5 mil, basically a non-starter, unless, with an implication that like ridiculous term would need to be attached to it in order for him to take that. And that didn't play out at all. He signed a
Nope.
perfectly like it's not even like a perfectly good deal. Like it's actually like a significant discount on like a proper term in order to stay in Toronto. So the hoopla around it was a joke, and people got fired up about Tavares and what he might be willing to take to stay, way out of context. And honestly, I just implore people to pay attention to who says what and how it plays out. Now, Knies, ultimately ends up signing as well before July 1. And like, I think it's at least viable to think that Knies might have gotten offer sheeted or that, someone would have propositioned it, in which case his salary might have slightly increased. Or, like with Miller and the Rangers and Carolina, like Carolina threatened the offer sheet and then that ended up working out into a trade. But the Rangers never really seemed keen on signing Miller. So a bit of a different story. And ultimately I look and go, where's the Gabe Vigliardi offer sheet? Gabe Vigliardi was unbelievably productive. He's right-handed. He's a really good player. He's got size. He's skilled. Like what? I haven't heard a peep about anyone offer sheeting Gabe Vigliardi.
I mean, it's because we have this one instance with St. Louis doing it a couple times after there being so long where it basically doesn't happen. And so I think there's this notion of like, have the floodgates opened? Are people thinking about this in a different way? And the reality is, it's really hard to create a contract that is something that will not be matched by their team, who tend to like the players that they reach RFA status with, who are worth a decent amount of, who are worth your time. So chances are they like having that player if that player is worth your time. So you have to get them to not match that contract. That's a huge hurdle. And then you got to be willing to give up all the
And you're
draft
not
picks.
outspending the Leafs.
No, probably not. You got to be able
No, not
to
probably not. You are not.
you got to be willing to give up draft picks potentially, and you have to have those draft picks. And like the way draft picks are used as currency in the league, it's actually really difficult to offer sheet people potentially because if you're a contending team, you may have traded some of your draft picks somewhere along the line in order to add to your team. So you have to have cap space, you have to like a player significantly more than the other team likes them, and you have to have all your draft picks lined up. Like it's just a very tricky situation. Now that most teams have cap space, it's really hard to squeeze someone out of a player because they can afford to be like, oh, we're uncomfortable giving this extra 800,000 on the AAV, but like we can do it. So we're just going to do it. Like it's a shame, but that's the way it is. So I just think the looming threat of it end up getting exaggerated because it happened recently, as opposed to if you look at the longer history, it generally doesn't happen.
I just think that it's the media that Toronto draws and it drives clicks and it drives eyeballs and people dial in on it. But I didn't really think it was ever gonna come to that. Again, you had we said all this the last episode, like nothing changed. Like Nye said he wanted to be here. The Leafs clearly wanted him here. The Leafs had a ton of cap space. Those are the three things that you need in order to strike a deal. The Leafs weren't going to play insane hardball with him. I'm sure they obviously did negotiate, still negotiation, but they're not going to draw a hard line in the sand at this point. But what I will say is some level of credit to Matthew Knies. Like he could have just not signed and if he wasn't signed right this second, people be freaking out and try to leverage the media. And he basically could have acted like you know who to try to drive his price up as much as possible. And he didn't. He said it himself. I want to sign before July 1. So, to help the team. Like, that's what you want to hear from a guy, not can I drag this out all summer? Can I threaten a Columbus offer sheet? Can I threaten going to Europe? Can I miss the first day of training camp and then have some hastily thrown together press conference while I stand beside the GM on day 2 and squeeze the team for every cent that they're worth and then go on every single commercial local to the city throughout that season and then not perform in the playoffs.
I feel like
So,
we're fast forwarding to the end a little bit here.
I, were any of those things wrong? That was an
No, I think
accurate timeline of what he did.
I think that in Toronto in the last few years, we've gotten used to unusual things like that timeline that you kind of laid out. And what Nyes did was the normal thing. It's what
Yes.
most guys do in this situation is they try and sign before so their team has an idea of the cap sheet. They're relatively well compensated. I mean, Nyes is going to be fine with this amount of money. Could he have made more? I don't know. For a guy who's evolving into, you'd like to believe a 30 plus goal scorer over the next little bit, I think they're going to be happy with this value with the cap going up. They're going to be buying his age 23 through 28 seasons. Those are great seasons to be buying. Like that's the absolute prime of Matthew Knies. I would be really surprised if at any point Knies feels like he's overpaid or is any kind of his contract's any kind of issue for the team. I think it'll just be a thing that exists out there. Now, I think, some people might believe more or less, like to what degree does Knies drive success on his own line, and to what degree is he coasting? We saw him basically only with Matthews last season and Marner, but he, first of all, he might not really be asked to do that, and he might have enough value in his power play and first line role that it doesn't really matter. I don't know. I think the
What?
players are paid at this level don't necessarily need to be a transcendent star who is, you just put them on the line with any old bums and they're fine. Like I think it's fine for him to just be a first line winger PP1 guy who scores and make this much money. I think that's great.
Yeah, I'll just add to that and be physical.
Yeah.
Like I actually think he lost some of that as the season went on. I've said this before. Matthews and Marner played such a skilled game together. I felt at times that Knies was trying to do that with them, alongside them as part of that, as opposed to being the wrecking ball that I believe he should be, and he obviously can be. It's not like you could pull together a collection of massive hits he threw this year, right? Like he fought Zach Whitecloud after Whitecloud lit him up, but it wasn't like Knies was going out there and just running guys over nonstop. He had a few times where he did. Like he hilariously ran over Dougie Hamilton at one point early in the season. Like there were a few. I'm not saying he didn't throw any hits throughout the year. He obviously did. But it wasn't like I was watching on a weekly basis going like, man, like this guy's out there with like an edge, some level of headhunting, like anything along those lines. Like I actually thought that the skilled game that Matthews and Marner played beside him like seeped into his game almost in like a bit of a negative way. Like I'd actually like to see him come back with a little bit more jam, especially if there's any level of offensive regression, right? Like he shot a extremely high shooting percentage. Like that, there's a very real chance that comes down next year, especially without Marner around too. Like Marner's genuinely a very good playmaker and was a good power play quarterback. And if they're down to like Morgan Riley or Oliver Ekman-Larsson doing that, like you're gonna feel it. That's at some point, right? So what if he's a 50-point player next year? Right? First year of that extension, and you see a drop in his production. And I'm just saying like a small drop. That's not a huge drop. But like I need to see him do the other things as well.
Yeah, I mean, so far his size has facilitated his skill more than it has helped him become a physical force. Like he uses his size to create space for himself, to box guys out, to get great position, to tip pucks in on the power play and things like that, more so than he uses it to absolutely run guys over. There's always going to be a balance to be struck there. I think he'll find it. I think he's just the type of guy that you bet on. Like I just think
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
not that
Oh
many
yeah.
human beings on the planet with his size and the way he can move and the hands that he has, and that there are, yeah, like I think you're right. Obviously you can look at his shooting percentage. I think over time he'll just get off more, like he'll just do a better job of getting off more shots. He's not going to necessarily shoot 20% his whole life, but I would just bet on him overall to just, his game to continue to get better. It's an easy
He,
thing to say about a guy as young as he is, but I don't think it's unrealistic either.
no, he should be getting better. I'm just saying for me, I think there's a lot of focus on the offensive production and I actually want to see it more on the physical side. You're right. Like in front of the net, he's so good because he's so strong, right? Like he's able to box out defensemen and win battles and do and do things in front just because of his size and his strength and how good his hands are and tight. I'm just for me, I actually want to see him like physically, initiate and engage and set the tone for games and I want to see him be the hunter, not the hunted, and add that like a more of that element to his game, which is normal. Like that was only his second full year in the league. Like it's hard to come in and look at a kid and be like, "Hey, play on this top line beside two superstars and also physically dominate games." Like there's going to be an evolution in time. I'm just And I'd say he's ahead of the proverbial curve of a traditional power forward. You know, they usually, when you look at them, it's more like 25, 26, 27. They really start hitting their stride. And you look at Knies, and again, second full year in the league, he's still only 22, turns 23 in the fall. Like there's a huge growth span potentially coming still. I just I want to see it come as more physicality. Like we're, you know, Florida is the buzz team that everyone's talking about. But I think the thing that most people are missing with Florida is what makes them so good is they have the best forecheck in the league. Like that's what drives their entire game. They forecheck aggressively, they cause a ton of turnovers, and they dominate possession as a result. And they're also super aggressive because they know Bob's behind them. They give the most breakaways of anyone in the league, and they're like, well, our goalie's amazing, so it doesn't matter. And so that's kind of where I want to see him go. But in terms of the contract, I mean, you always want more term. I'm not thrilled with the term. I don't think it's terrible work because that seems to just be where RFAs are going in general now, right? Like Quentin Byfield signed for 5 years. We'll see what happens with Foliardi here. We're not seeing guys max out anymore as RFAs, generally speaking. So I think getting into that range is like it's not bad, it's not great. It's just like you guys did a solid job and you avoided the drama of more made up offer sheet rumors and things of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, if you're thinking from the player's perspective or the agent's perspective, it's just so nice to hit free agency a couple years before you're 30. You know what I mean? Like that, there is just that age is just a number, but the difference between being 28 and being 30 in terms of the way you're perceived is massive. So I understand them shooting for that. Because yeah, I think it's going to make a huge difference to his potential earning power. I think he's going to do great over the course of his contract. And yeah, I think everyone is going to be happy. Perhaps the most intriguing move is the Matias Maccelli addition, which is a guy they got for a conditional third round pick.
Points
He
for
had
Italian, points for Italian.
Italian points. Okay, that's it. And I don't know if I can give Italian points if I have the right
Yeah,
to do it, but
you
Anthony
cannot
officially
give
can.
Italian points, but
Yeah.
you can accept them.
Okay. Yeah, I'll allow them. I'll co-sign, but I can't sign for myself. Um, this is kind of, everything we've talked about so far, bringing back JT on a reasonable contract, what Nye's extension looks like makes sense for both parties, getting Nick Waugh and how he fits in the team. Like this is all very logical stuff that you can easily explain. And I'm not saying that this is a wild move, but it is a more interesting move with a wider range of outcomes because Matias Maccelli is coming off a truly unimpressive season with Utah. And, Utah is the sort of team that could use a good player. And if he's not able to make an impact there, you do wonder if he's able to make an impact. You're talking potentially about top six role with the Maple Leafs. At the same time, this guy's young. He had two strong seasons prior to that. He is a good playmaker and someone who, in a sense, he rarely becomes available for free. A guy in kind of his mid 20s with two quality offensive seasons under his belt. And, he's a fun guy to watch. Watching some of the highlight reels of him from last year, and I think
Sick.
it's really nice. Like the passing is really good. The patience with the puck is really good. It is quite funny how many of these passes result in Lawson Krause just blasting a puck into a goalie's crest. Happens all the time. I think there's a few more assists that
Center chest. He just live in center
yeah,
chest.
yeah. So there's probably a few more assists that he might have had. But again, this is someone who was getting, relatively serious rookie of the year, sorry, Calder Trophy votes in 2022, 2023. And he had, 49 points and then 57 points the following year. He's not the guy that you kind of think of as being the Treliving guy or that, he's not the biggest, he's not the toughest, but this is an interesting skill set for a very low price because it's a player that basically Utah's given up on.
Yeah, there's a few different levels to it, I think. First off, I like Michelli. I think he's a good player back in, I don't know when Yahoo folded up, but back when writing at Yahoo, Canada over there, I wrote about Maccelli at one point because he was just an exciting young player, unbelievable playmaker. I thought he was kind of falling under the radar. And he was a player that I did kind of look at when I was doing the trade series ahead of the offseason. I was like, do I write about Maccelli? And the reason I didn't is just because I still think that they have a lot of small guys, right? So it's not even, and it has nothing to do with Maccelli. I just think that the Leafs forward group needs to like change their complexion a little bit. But I think Maccelli in a fishbowl can be part of a solution moving forward. I just look at the composition of a forward group that right now, they could be trying to keep Nick Robertson. Sounds more likely than not. Has Max Domi. Callie Järnkrok's not big. Like even Scott Laughton's not big. Like he's grindy, different kind of player. Physical, will throw his body around and make his presence known. But, I just kind of looked and was like, well, like how many small guys are you really going to have? That said, and that aside, I think Maccelli is a little bit more exciting and a little bit more capable than most of those guys. I'd just like to actually see one of those other guys get taken off the team now. So, two different things. But Maccelli is he's young. Is kind of what we talked about, right? It's like no one was chatting up Brandon Montour when he washed out of Buffalo. He was a small right-handed defenseman, and Florida took a chance on him for a third-round pick. They're like, he has a good skill set. We have a different team. Like we have a need for what he brings. Let's bring him in, see if it fits into something, and it did. And obviously, Montour's paid now. Maccelli kind of strikes me as the same gamble. It's like we need playmaking. We need guys that can carry the puck through the neutral zone, play with pace. Even though he's small, he can hold on to the puck in the offensive zone and make those kinds of things happen and look for shooters. Like the Leafs have all kinds of shooters. Like obviously Nylander and Matthews are top of the list. Like Nylander's second in the league in goals last year, and no one has more goals than Matthews since he entered the league. But it's like Knies had 29, McMahon had 20, Tavares had 38. Like these guys need facilitators. Like there's clear opportunity here for him. So I think that part's exciting. Again, I like the general premise of like, let's take a gamble on a young guy who, as you said, has 2 productive seasons under his belt already in 3 seasons in the league. He had a bad third season, no question about it. Let's take a swing on him at a third-round pick and see if we can kind of rekindle that offense. Like you have to be particularly bad to not be productive alongside Tavares or Matthews, right? Like if you're getting a bunch of offensive zone faceoffs with Tavares, like it actually doesn't take much to like have a semi-reasonable productive season.
Yeah, I mean, he played most of his minutes last season with Lawson Krause and Nick Bjugstad, and those two players combined for 37 points.
And Bjugstad was bad last year. Like he was coming off an injury. Like you heard him talk about it at his end of season press conference. Like I came back. Like it took me a long time to get going. Like Bjugstad was particularly bad last year, and Kroos did nothing.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked a lot about a couple things heading to the offseason. One is that you weren't super enthusiastic about the options available in free agency. Now, that's often the case because a lot of times the talent doesn't reach free agency. We'll see the next season, 2026, could be a different situation. But we've talked about that. And we also talked about, and this has been talked about at length, the idea that the Leafs just don't have a great cupboard of prospects and picks to trade from. So if you don't have great free agents available and all the other teams are vying for those free agents and they're likely to be overpaid, and you don't have elite trade chips to get big time proven impact players, what do you have? You have salary cap space. That's what Marner leaving gets you. And so you can put that salary cap space towards contracts that other teams may feel are problematic for one reason or another, and you disagree. And it's a kind of like a challenge trade in that sense. And it's not high stakes because Utah's just getting a conditional pick here. But basically, you're saying to Utah, like, you think this player's not good. We think he's good. We'll
Yeah,
bet against that.
yeah,
And for, I'd say, most of Maccelli's career, he's been good. And like you said, it's not too hard for a playmaker to thrive alongside Matthews, alongside Tavares and Nylander, setting up Matthew Knies potentially. It looks maybe he'll play more left wing, so maybe won't play with Knies, but whatever the case may be, I think there's a little bit of Max Domi in him where you throw him further down the lineup. I mean, this is literally a little bit what we saw with Utah last season. Like you throw him down the lineup, he doesn't have guys to pass to who are going to finish those plays, and his talent is, wasted a little bit. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if he gets the trust of the coaches. We'll see if they feel like he justifies a bigger role in the team. But it's not hard to imagine a world where he has this nice bounce back and the Leafs think, wow, we stole that guy for nothing. And then he's an RFA after the season. They'd have to figure that situation out, especially if he has a good year. But like, that's a great problem to have of like, oh yeah, this guy we picked up basically off the scrap heap. He's been so good for us that he's going to require a decent contract. Like you cross that bridge when you come to it.
That's also like a happy to pay it. If he's good,
Yeah.
happy to pay it. And it's also important to kind of think about why he washed out of Utah, right? I mean, obviously he struggled there this year. And I think a large part of that was Logan Cooley emerging. And they just have a ton of small forwards on that team. Their top three scorers were Clayton Keller, Logan Cooley, and Nick Schmaltz. Like no team in the league had that small of a top three. And so you look at that, you're like, oh, well, all of our top scorers are these like small skilled guys. And then it's like, hey, Maccelli, can you be like a third line, another small skilled guy? It's like I don't the Leafs have too many small guys just in general throughout their top 12 in my opinion. But like their top guys have some size, right? Like you could feasibly play with like Bobby McMahon and like they could figure it out. The Leafs having too many small guys is for me like partly what I would want to do. Like I just look at the lineup and go, it's a little bit. I think they need a little bit more. But like the Utah lineup is just like objectively like anyone be like that's too small. Like you can't have that many small skilled guys. Plus Alex Kerfoot is like meaningful there. Like Michael Carcone played 53 games last season. He's 5'9". It's like how many small like you can't have half your forward group like under 6 foot. Like you're not going anywhere. And that Utah team went nowhere. So I think he was a bit of a victim of circumstance to some degree. I think he also like he needs to look within himself. Like if you like I like the skill package, there's no question. You're talking about his highlights, they're unbelievable when he's on and like he's dancing. He's a fun player to watch. I think where he gets into trouble is, you see those passes that he connects on, half of them you look at and go like, you probably shouldn't even have tried that. And, he'll carry it through the neutral zone and look to sling like a far side pass across the blue line off the rush through like three bodies. Like you can't play like that if you actually plan to be truly successful in meaningful hockey. Like that's what you try and like pick up hockey kind of thing. He's skilled enough to connect on it, but that's not a way that you should want to be playing. You shouldn't be looking at three bodies and going, "Can I saucer one through this?" Like you have to make stronger plays than that. And he obviously is pass first. Like he doesn't shoot much. He has a fine shot. It's not a bad shot. Like I think it's a reasonable shot. Like he can beat goalies clean. But he's got to figure out a balance and it's all going to be about puck management for him. That's really what it's going to come down to. It's like, are you managing the puck and playing a smart game? Because Berube's not going to have it. Like if he's cutting through the neutral zone, trying to saucer passes through three guys, he's not going to play. But I like
Yeah.
the bet because he's skilled enough to figure it out.
And also, if he's not going to figure it out in this situation, he's not going to figure it out. Like this is, if
Yeah.
he has had issues in the past being locked in and making the right choices, this is the time to figure that out because he has to recognize that like he has been dealt an unbelievable hand here.
Yeah.
His circumstances have changed enormously. And like, I don't know, some people get that and it doesn't, it doesn't connect with them. It doesn't make them act any differently, but like, he is in an infinitely better spot than he was a couple of weeks ago, and
Oh, yeah.
he should recognize that. And
Yeah.
maybe the effort will be according to that.
It was interesting. I don't know if you listened to his media introductory. First off, absolutely hilarious. They're like, "Do you know anyone on the team?" And he was like, "No." I got a good chuckle out of that. It's like, I don't know anybody on this team. It's like, all right. But interesting was him kind of noting like, yeah, I told my agent like I'd go to Toronto, like I want to go there. Now he's a guy under contract, and I flagged this because I think it's important like people realize how the league works. It's like he was a guy under contract with no trade protection, and he's still having conversations with his agent where it's like, would you want to go there or not? Because that is how the league works. Like a lot of what happens is driven by guys wanting to play for certain teams or in certain situations. Like Columbus was in on Noah Dobson. Noah Dobson wanted to go to Montreal. He ended up in Montreal. Like Chris Tanev wanted to come home. Everybody knew that. Like Mark Giordano, when they traded for him, wanted to come back home. Everybody knew that. So I think it's really important as like people look at movement and how things kind of play out. It's like a lot of these guys, whether they have trade protection or not, they might not fully dictate where they want to go, but they're giving an indication of like, yeah, I want to play there. No, I don't want to play there. And that drives the league, right? Like it's not just, well, he's an RFA in a year. Like he's gonna have to sign a deal. If he's already indicating, I don't want to go there, there's no chance I'm gonna sign there in a year from now. I'm sure the Leafs, why would you even bother at that point? Right. So it's kind of interesting how the league works in that sense. I think sometimes people are just like, well, trade or no trade or whatever the case is. Trade clauses can always be lifted. You could always convince a guy to go somewhere potentially, or not always, but you could. Or if guy has no trade protection at all, like Maccelli, but you're still sitting there and he's going, yeah, I want to play in Toronto. That's a good option for me. That's something I'm interested in. It just a lot of these moves and what we end up seeing are really like the league is very much changing in that regard. Like it used to be like just shut up and go where we tell you. It's not like that anymore.
Well, I mean, again, he's not a player of immense stature who has leverage for that reason. But as you mentioned, he's about to be an RFA. So he has a little bit of leverage in that sense of, yeah, if you kind of put out the signal, like, yeah, I have no interest in being in Nashville in the long term, then that lessens his value. Like you are acquiring Michelli under his current deal, but you're also acquiring sort of the rights to him as an RFA. And that situation gives you a chance to extend him at a more reasonable contract than his market rate. So like that is part of what you're acquiring. So if you have a notion that like that part of it is not really going to work out for you, then that makes the player less valuable. It's not even about Maccelli being like, I'm only going to try with whatever team. It's like that part of it, the RFA part of it has to work. There's also, there's an element of agent relationships and you want to keep
Yeah.
those good, and that's part of it too. But we don't need to walk down that road. I do want to talk a little bit. I mean, I want to give you an opportunity because they kind of sort of minor signings. Was there anybody there that stood out? Dakota Mermis is back. Michael Pezzetta coming in from the Habs. Anyone there you think that we're going to be talking about at some point this season?
I mean, I could see both Mermis and Pezzetta getting into games. We did see Mermis get into games last year. They obviously liked him. It was just an unfortunate year. He broke his jaw. Then he got claimed on waivers. The Leafs reclaimed him as soon as they could. He ended up playing like 4 games. I think he's a perfectly serviceable defenseman that can take competent shifts in the league. And, those are sometimes the kind of signings where like nobody talks about them or thinks much of them. But hey, if you have a guy that has to play like 10, 15 games in the league for, any given year for whatever reason, I mean, ideally you have some guys that you can actually have some level of faith in. So I like that they kept him around. Um, I like him for what he is. I think he has some mobility. I think he'll mix it up. He's gone into a fight in the NHL before. He'll, that's kind of what you want from me from like an eighth defenseman, like a veteran. He's played some games in the league. He's shown he can do some things in it. I'm not saying he's great. Otherwise, he'd obviously be a regular player in the NHL. But for that kind of spot, I don't think you can ask for much more. Pizzetta, I'm kind of intrigued by. More so like how many games is he going to play? Like if we're watching this guy be a regular, I think that's a problem. But um, he he can skate, and because he can skate, he's actually quite physical. Like he can get in on the forecheck and blow a guy up with a big hit. And he has. He a few years ago he blew up a number of guys. This year did not go well for him at all. Didn't even have a point, was not productive, just struggled. He, I remember watching the Habs let down the stretch. He came in when Emil Heineman got hurt, and Heineman was really good on the line with Jake Evans and Yoel Armia. And Pezzetta kind of got shoehorned into that role, which was like a checking kind of role, like a defensive line role. And I thought he was out of his element in that kind of situation. But hey, if he plays like if he's playing like 20 plus games, where I don't think we're gonna like it. But if he comes in every once in a while with his hair on fire and blows a guy up or gets into a fight, I mean, I'll like it.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty agnostic on that type of player. I think, Mermis is more likely to me to provide something tangible to the team. Pezzetta, sure, he's around. You need some bodies. Like he's an NHL player. As you mentioned, kind of an energy role. He's never averaged more than 10 minutes a game in any season. I am interested. 'Cause we talked, I mean, that's kind of the extent of the moves that they've made so far.
Are
But
you
there's also,
interested in that sense of what it means for Ryan Reeves? Were you
I
going
don't.
there? Or
Oh, I mean, if you want to go there, I don't find myself particularly interested in what's going on with Ryan Reeves right now. I
well,
kind of assume we're not going to see him.
yeah, and yeah, I don't know if I buy in on that assumption. I'm not saying that they should. I'm just saying he's under contract. He's over the variable amount. They're flush with cap space, so they don't need to send him down anymore the way they did last year. I listened to his interview with Cam and Strick. He's well aware that he's 83 games from 1,000, and he'd like to do it. I'm sure he's going to get into games. I would be floored if he doesn't get into games at some point. And but now you have two guys that basically are for that role. Pezzetta's not nearly as good of a fighter as Reeves. Pezzetta's not really a good fighter in general, I don't think. Um, but he's courageous and he'll go up against big time fighters and at least engage. But I'm kind of curious watching it. Like Pezzetta got a multi-year deal, so is that to kind of take over from Reeves and to have some muscle, quote unquote, around for the odd scenario? Is Reeves just fully variable? Like I think whether Reeves is I, like Reeves being in the lineup or not is a story to me because I think there's a big difference if he's in the lineup or not, and in a unproductive way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've sort of been assuming that he isn't, and maybe you're right. It's not fair to totally assume that he's going to get buried because, as you say, the cap space is there. I think signing Pezzetta is an indication that Ryan Reeves is not a one-off. They see value in someone who brings that to the team. Now, whether that player, like you said, is it a specific scenario? Is a certain team rolling through town? Is that guy more of a 13th forward? We'll see how that plays out. But you could have made an argument before that Treliving just thought that Reeves was sort of this special guy to bring a certain energy to the locker room. And you can argue whether it was worth it and if it
Was
did
he a
anything.
special guy to talk up Vegas?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I it was kind of, I mean, I never liked the Reeves thing from the beginning, and clearly it didn't. The results have not been different with Reeves. He's not sprinkled any magic dust on the team. But I think when he was first signed, people thought to some degree, like, oh, this is an interesting case where they feel like like we talked about, this is obviously a very different player. But prior to free agency opening, we talked about Brad Marchand having kind of like a unique clubhouse locker room element that other guys don't necessarily have, and that it's hard to put a value on it. You could see that Reeves was someone they maybe felt was in that camp. Pezzetta isn't in that camp. Pezzetta is like, we actually think it's good to have somebody who does these things. And so I guess that's interesting in the what it says about the organization in terms of whether Reeves plays or not. Like a line, how many times do we talk about David Kampf and Reeves don't make sense on the same line? Well, if Scott Lawton ends up being 4C, kind of the same situation. But that's just the reality that Reeves doesn't make sense on any line in his age 39 season in the NHL. Like he
Yeah, I mean,
shouldn't be out there at this point.
if you gave up a first round pick just to play Scott Lawton at 4C and play Ryan Reeves on right wing, I mean, that's why the Reeves thing to me is at least worthy of some level of discussion or pondering or anything. Look, I'm just not assuming anything on that. I'd like to think that he probably gets sent down or whatever the case is, but I'm also thinking, you think when they play Boston and Tanner Jeannot comes in, that one of those guys isn't going to dress? I think one of them will.
Well, they have two guys, right? To the idea that neither of them is going to play in some of these situations, I think it's naive to assume that they won't. I think one of those guys is going to be in there for something like that.
Yeah, and I don't think Treliving or even Berube are um, as archaic as some might think that they are. I mean, like, look at, I mean, they just traded for Matias Maccelli. How many undersized guys did Treliving have in Calgary? Manjapane, Gaudreau, obviously, Dylan Dubé. Like, you kind of go down. Like, they had tons of guys that were like smaller, not exactly physical. Like, he traded for Elias Lindholm. Like, you kind of go through it, right? Like, tons of guys that you could think of. Like when Berube won the cups, like Jaden Schwartz was playing on the top line, right? I don't think I'm not sitting here saying like they're gonna play these guys all season. I don't think that's the case either. I'm just kind of curious more than anything to see how it shakes out. Like I don't think both of those guys are off the team the way some might. So like I said, it's hard to shake out the roster still. It feels like not a lot needs to happen, but like a good chunk of something needs to happen in terms of like trimming away guys that are redundant and trying to find some other like good hockey player kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's where I want to go next is that coming into this offseason, there seemed to be an assumption of, oh, they'll get rid of Järnkrok because he's got low actual salary and everyone's got cap space and someone will take him. And, Kampf seems to be redundant now, especially if Lawton is the 4C and that still is a little bit of money. And there must be a way to do that. And, Nick Robertson didn't establish himself last season the way you might have hoped. And you're sort of stuck in the same spot with him as it seems like always. Is someone else going to see some value in him? And here we sit, after a week and a half after July 1st, and all those guys are still in the organization. So I find myself wondering, is anything happening with those guys? Are those guys kind of getting held back in reserve as some kind of salary ballast in an incoming trade of some kind? Because it does feel like they're a guy short, whether that guy is whoever plays right wing on the Matthews line, or that ends up being a player who bolsters a third line, whatever it may be. It does seem right now like it's hard to make all these pieces fit in a logical way without feeling like it's just, you've got almost 5 million left on the cap and why aren't you doing something with it? And getting rid of those guys would help with that in theory, clearing some space, clearing roster room, etc. Do you still think that one of those guys is going to get shipped out? Or are we going to enter the season here with all these players that we had half assumed were out the door before the offseason opened up?
I think we'll see one move. I'd be surprised if none of them did, to be honest. So I think multiple is a tall task. I mean, look, we just saw Matt Dumba get traded right before we started this podcast, and Dallas had to attach a second round pick to make that happen. And he only has 1 year on his deal. Now, I think Dumba is way overpaid. Like, I think he's significantly more overpaid than Calle Järnkrok. And Kampf plays center. I mean, Dumba plays right defense. He's a right-handed D-man. So you could argue it's negligible. Dumba makes more. Dumba's also done more at times in his career and only has 1 year left, and Kampf has two. I actually think that there's a number of teams that could use Kampf as like a defensive 4C, and I genuinely think like he'd be a good fit on a number of teams. I actually like Kampf. I've always found is like one guy to me, like I get why fans don't like him. But I think he is like genuinely like really good defensively. He's a quality penalty killer. He's solid in the faceoff circle. He can skate. He's big. He scored a few goals in the playoffs. Like he can shoot a little bit. But I honestly think that they kind of, like did him dirty might be tough, but like to say it that to that level, but they kind of did. When you sign a guy for that money and then you say like go play on the fourth line with like Ryan Reeves, how on earth is he ever going to be successful in that scenario? Like he was a genuinely good center with Ilya Mikheyev. Like genuinely, he was like good. And then you're like, go play with a 35-plus-year-old enforcer. What was he possibly going to do in that scenario?
Well, he's the sort of guy who is good in this hyper specific role, but for that hyper specific role, and by that I mean getting buried constantly in the defensive zone, tough minutes,
But
sometimes
with
up.
some quality line mates.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying is like he can't play that role without the line mates. He needs
Yeah.
to be surrounded by players who are also capable of living in these dangerous situations that he needs to be thrown in for the team to extract value. Like that's how they get the value out of Kampf is by continually putting him in dangerous situations and giving him the chance to just stalemate those tough spots to give the rest of the team opportunities. Like that's how Kampf works and he's good at it. But like you said, you can't do it with Reeves. You couldn't do it with like Max Domi. If you threw
No.
Max Domi on his left wing, like it's over. If you put Nick Robertson on his line, like it's over. So he needs kind of specific players to make his whole shtick work. And now suddenly you're kind of building around your fourth line center, which is not normally how team building works. And so he's a bit of a complicated player in that way. And it seems like this version of, I know that Treliving signed his contract at the end of the day, but it seems like that Berube doesn't like him enough to really commit to the Kampf project and make that work in a way that, again, would extract the value out of him. Whereas if another team is willing to commit to this hyper defensive line with the right players to make it happen, he can be the key piece in that, but he can't be the only piece in that. And maybe there's another team who sees the value.
And I mean, we'll see. I thought it was kind of telling that that quote I read out about their center group, like he didn't even mention Camp, didn't
Yeah.
even remotely come up, right? He didn't. He could have added him as a fifth guy.
Yeah, could have said,
He's
and
not.
it's so great that we have Kampf as well. Like we've got so much talent down the
He
middle.
he's not a winger. Like he is
Nope.
purely a center. Like you could say, oh well, you could Max Domi could have been included in that center list, but you could also just say Domi's a winger now, and no one will blink twice, or it's just a hard shrug. Okay, great. So given all that, and just given the price tag with the term, like if you were asking me to trade one of the two, it would easily be Kampf. I also look at Järnkrok and say, if he's healthy, he's a double-digit goal scorer. Like he was genuinely good on the penalty kill for them in the playoffs this year. He just like he wasn't healthy all year, and he never got his game in order. And I don't trust him a lick in the playoffs to ever be productive at this rate. But as a regular season guy, he'll hit double digits in goals if he's healthy. And he's heading into a contract year. So I'd imagine he's going to have a pretty good year, right? He's like probably one of his last contracts coming up after this one. So I'm sure he wants to position himself well for that. Like he can play up and down the lineup. Like we've seen him take competent shifts alongside Austin Matthews. We've seen him take competent shifts alongside John Tavares. We've seen him play in a checking role. Like, I just think there's a bit more versatility to, I mean, I don't think it's true. Like there's more versatility to his game. You could kind of squint and slot him into a number of roles and be like, yeah, he could probably be fine there. Right? Like you could say, go play on a checking line with Nick Waugh.
Yeah,
And
like
he,
a Wah McMahon Yarncroke third
yeah,
line is
yeah,
you could make that happen. That could
that,
work.
yeah, right. Like you could look at that and go, yeah, that's probably a really good checking line. A bit annoying to play against. Like Waugh's massive. Järnkrok, like he works hard. He doesn't accomplish a lot sometimes. He works hard. He's not maybe not accomplishing a ton, but that it's still annoying to play guys that work hard like that. And McMahon can fly around the ice and he can burn you if he gets a chance. Like I think you could viably look at him and say, I think we can figure out a role for you. If your plan is for Lawton to play 4C, which again I can't state enough, I don't agree with. then I just there's no point of Kampf at that rate. You're gonna have a $2.4 million 13th forward.
Yeah, I mean, I in Järnkrok again, as you mentioned, there's a lot of utility, and guys get hurt over the course of the season, and he's flexible, and hopefully he's healthy, and so I can see that. I also, I struggle with Nick Robertson at this point because that
Another
the
small guy. How many small guys are you gonna have?
that idea of we're gonna do Domi and Robertson on the third line, but it's actually a fourth line and it's a situational group. It had its ups and downs, but it did have a logic to it. And I don't know where he currently would fit. Like, I don't see him with Nick Waugh. I don't see him with Scott Lawton on some kind of fourth line. I don't know. Maybe that is the way if Waugh really is soaking up so much defensive stuff that Lawton ends up doing more offensive zone faceoffs. But I don't know. I just don't really get what Robertson is to the Leafs at this point. And I mean, it has felt for kind of quite a while now that the better thing to do would be to find him a home elsewhere where there's a role for him that he can really settle into.
Yeah, I find him a little bit of a tough one for me, just in the sense that he can score. And there is something to that. Like you need guys that can put the puck in the net. And like it's one of the hardest skills, and they've obviously lost noteworthy offense in Mitch Marner. I don't think like Nick Wall will chip in some offense, but he's really not obviously going to come close. And Maccelli is a wild card. Like I like him. I think it's a good bet. I think he could easily, he could easily have a 60 point season. Like honestly, I don't think it would take him much. But he also had 18 points last year.
Yeah, it's a good bet, but it's a bet.
Yeah.
Like the downside is very real with him.
Like in his career, he has 37 goals in 224 games. Matias Maccelli, that is. So you look at it and it's like over the last 2 years, Robertson has 29. And so I say that all just, I understand the idea of keeping him in the mix because you just really don't know what you're going to get yet from Maccelli. You obviously need offense. He has a skill, which is an important one, which they kind of need now, a little bit now more than the past few years, arguably. And so there's something there. But to your point, it's like, how do you place him in the lineup? Like, I'm not, like, you're not going to watch him. I don't think it's a viable line to play him with like John Tavares and like William Nylander or like Bobby McMahon, John Tavares, Nick Robertson is like your scoring line.
I mean, I guess like that is one of the more palatable versions, but I still don't like it.
Like, if I was looking at the lineup right now, I would actually I would actually view it as like my fourth line is Domi, Robertson, Steven Lorentz. We saw that line play a few times. I'd be like, you're going to be a little bit more offensive and like energy focused. And like we have like a top line that's going to obviously still go head to head with guys at times. And then we have a third line with like Lawton, Waugh, and Järnkrok. And a second line that's going to have McMahon and Tavares and either Nylander or Maccelli, and then Nylander, Maccelli with Matthews and Knies. Like that's how I would look at it, which means David Kampf isn't in the lineup. Michael Pezzetta is not in the lineup. Obviously, Scott Lawton's not at 4C. So I don't think that's how they're looking at it. I'm not saying it is. I'm saying if I was looking at the lineup right now, running it, that's probably how I would shade it.
Yeah, I don't like Lawton at 4C from a team building perspective and from the way it doesn't justify the moves that have been made in the past. But we are where we are now. And I still kind of want to see them give a run at Domi, Knies, Matthews for a little bit. I still
That's fair.
remember the Bertuzzi, Knies, Domi, the brief
Everyone
magic.
does.
And I again, like I don't know if that would last over the course of a whole season, but if you're able to do that, then that makes it a lot easier to fill out the rest of the lineup. And then you have a third line that probably includes McMahon and Waugh, and then you start to feel a bit better about that offensively than some other iterations of it. And then you can do Maccelli, Tavares, Nylander, and you feel like that's going to create some offense. You don't quite get the
I see that line getting thrown out a lot, and I don't know how I feel about it. Like
well,
Maccelli might
there's
be the best defensive player on that line, and that's problematic to me.
yeah, and there's also the aspect of we've seen Tavares thrive alongside guys who can do some work on the boards, like the work that
Tavares,
him.
Nylander
Well,
basically only like not only he works best with power forwards.
yeah, exactly. So that aspect of it is a little bit interesting, and also Maccelli, he likes to hang on to the puck, and Nylander likes to hang on to the puck, and there's only one puck out there, so that's another thing that could be a problem at a certain point. But I don't know. I just think that you're kind of it feels like you're stuck with Domi, and I feel like the one way that you can actually make something happen with Domi that's additive to the team is to try and see if he can find that chemistry with Matthews again and see if that works. Again, it might become more of an option than a true season long thing, but I would want to see it tried.
That's fair and probably the main thing that I like come back to, or it's like I do think Domi would be reasonably respectable in that role. Like he'd produce some, if anything. And he brings, he brings a little bit of gamesmanship and jam, and I think those things are important. And when he's engaged, like he's been effective, and when he hasn't been engaged, aka go play on the fourth line and play with Nick Robertson. I mean, it's a dog's breakfast. So I like it's a fair argument. It's the one I go back and forth on. I'm really down on how he played for like 4 months last year. Like I don't think that's the way you should play. I think if you're pushed down the lineup, you should give reason to move up the lineup. And I don't think he did that for about 65% of last season. Like I think he was just like, all right, I'm down here. It is what it is. And
Yeah. I
that's
mean,
not for me. That's
there's
not for
not
me.
much of an argument to be made that he was any good for the vast majority of last season. Like there really isn't a counter to that. I think you're just hoping that he can refocus in a bigger role and show you what that playmaking can do and be your, poor
Yeah.
man's Mitch Marner offensively, not defensively, obviously. But I don't know.
And
It's going to be interesting because there's
before we wrap up, are there
go
any
for it.
guys you're eyeing out there, UFA or trade, that interest you?
Yeah, I mean, from a trade perspective, like that's more it just that feels more likely to me. And yet today, like before we did this recording, I spent a lot of time scrolling through the sort of $5 to $7 million range where like maybe you could send Kampf back the other way or something to make a trade work. And does anyone feel like a salary, kind of like a Maccelli thing where like you're getting someone back and they might be slightly overpaid or it's a slightly problematic deal, but you like it. And I really struggled. I was coming over names like, like Tyler Toffoli, but I'm like, you know what? I think the Sharks would want to hold on to him at the end of the day. Like that contract still has a couple of years on it. They want their guys to play. And yeah, I thought it was really, at one point, I'm like, what if we just brought Tyler Bertuzzi home? Now the cap's going up. That deal doesn't look as bad as it looked when it was first signed. Again, you got proof of concept with him playing with both Tavares and Matthews. That kind of interests me. I don't think it's realistic, but yeah, I really did. I struggled to find guys that felt in the range that they could shop in, and you genuinely believed it would make a difference.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't pay a ton for Bertuzzi, but
No, I think
if
it's like if they don't love what they're getting, which
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd probably look a little bit elsewhere first if I could. Um, I see Jack Roslovic's name get thrown out a lot now.
he's kind of
Again,
fun sometimes, but like again, it's a fit thing. It's like how many of these guys are you piling up on your wings?
that's my issue. It's like yeah, if you had a bunch of other different kinds of players, I'd have no issue with Jack Roslovic in the mix. Like unlike a lot of the other guys, he at least he's 6'2", and he can fly around. Like he'd add something. He can score. Has some level of history with Matthews. I think you could, again, you could say, yeah, he could play potentially, at least skilled enough wise, alongside Matthews and Knies and not look out of place and offer some size and some speed. But then again, it's like, okay, so where's Max Domi playing? Where's Maccelli playing? Are you signing Nick Robertson? Like you can't have all these guys on the team. I mean, you can. You're just not going to be that good, and you're not going to like watching it. So it just he seems to me more like a shoe would have to drop, and I'd have to really understand it, which I think that's kind of been the implication too, right? Where it's like, yeah, there might be some interest there on both sides, but something needs to happen in order to facilitate that move. And it's not even about money. It's about we need to move a guy because this just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think
So
if there's a way to get rid of Domi, then suddenly that looks
yeah,
like a more interesting acquisition. And again, like he's a talk about kind of like a highlight reel. Like he's a guy who can put on a really nasty performance on a given night, not always consistent, but as you said, a little bit bigger than some of the other guys and definitely has the speed. Um, yeah, I mean, there's not a lot. It's been picked over, but you do kind of feel like there's, I don't know, it does feel like that we're not quite
the,
done here.
the guy that I would be interested in adding, and I would pursue him pretty aggressively, is Evan Rodriguez. And first off, the Leafs lack right-handed right wingers, and that drives me nuts. I like guys on their proper handedness. Rodriguez is signed for 2 more years, 3 mil a year, dirt cheap for how good he's been. He's competently played up the lineup alongside Barkov and Reinhart. He's gone down the lineup and found ways to chip in. I think people are going to look and say, well, he's been like a 30-ish point scorer. I don't care. 15 points twice, back-to-back playoff runs, 15 points. Like he finds a way to contribute. He's really good defensively. If like you could play him with Knies and Matthews on the right wing, and he'll do just enough offensively, but also be really good defensively. You could play him on the second line, and again, would do the same thing with Tavares and whoever else on the left side, which allows you to move Nylander up to the top line and load up. You could play him on the checking line. And again, he's a $3 million player. He has cup experience. Obviously, he's been a really good player in the playoffs. He's a bit annoying, which I like. There's a bit of a personality there. I think he pisses guys off, potentially me included during the last playoff run. So, you know, the question is, I don't think Florida's going to do the Leafs any favors. Rodriguez, a Toronto boy, maybe if he wanted to come back to Toronto, they would do him a solid. They're over the cap. They're going to have to make a move. He's the kind of guy I look at and say, can you get him for one of the Leafs goalie prospects? Potentially. Because Bob isn't getting any younger. They have maybe one interesting Russian youngish goalie. Well, two now. They traded for Tarasov. They have another guy they drafted in the fifth round that's just coming over. I think it's a decent offer for a team that's in a cap crunch, for a player that I don't think that they'll treat him like he has a no trade clause, but I don't think they're going to like do poor by him either. He's been a really good Panther and he's won there. I don't think they're going to just say like, you're going to Siberia and we don't give a shit about you, but they do need to move him.
Yeah, I mean, there might be a middle ground between Siberia and the Maple Leafs, right? Like, I think that they could
And
probably hope to find somewhere else to put him. But yeah, I mean, if they're able to, if the Panthers are willing and the price is reasonable, like that is a player who fits
he,
and a player who, again, can, as you mentioned, can be in a variety of roles and still perform at a
he,
high level.
he's interesting to me because I could look at the roster from that point and say like, there's a ton of lineup combinations that make sense now. Whereas right now, like when we go through it, I'm like, we're debating. It's like, well, does Domi play 4C or does he play first line right wing? And there's like some level of like, this doesn't like fully make sense. Like it needs to get sorted out a little bit. Rodriguez actually settles in a little, like the more quality players you can add. Like you can find fits that make logical sense and then things kind of fall into place. Like right now, there's just a little bit too much hope. It's like, are we getting like 7 or 8 goal Max Domi for like 35 points and floating around for half the season, playing on the top line right wing with Austin Matthews and Matthew Knies? Or are we getting like super engaged Max Domi who could probably put like 65 points up alongside them, be physical and annoying, right? Like, and then we're like, oh, Matias Maccelli's on the second line after that. Like, it's a little bit too much. We don't know what we're getting from these guys, and you'd be asking them to play big roles. So it's like if they could add one more quality forward somehow, and I'd consider Rodriguez that. He might not be super productive, but he's a quality forward that you can trust night in, night out to be a plus player in the NHL. I actually think they kind of start falling into place quite nicely as a team. But that's the big task ahead of them. Can they do that and also probably get rid of some of the redundant guys?
Yeah, and that, as you said, that's a task ahead because over the course of this conversation, which has not been a short conversation, we have not mentioned defensemen once. We have
I was gonna
not
say we haven't
mentioned
talked about D-man at all.
goaltending once, and I don't think we're gonna get there. I think it's about time to wrap. But like that just goes to show that it really is about this forward group. It is
Yeah.
about figuring out what to do with those guys that don't seem to fit anymore, finding if with their limited trade assets they're able to find one more guy, or if at the end of the day and the free agent scavenging, like they really do like somebody at the end. It does feel like there's maybe one move to come that matters. If there isn't, they're gonna need a lot of these higher variance guys like the Domis and Maccellis of the world to give them something. And it's not to say they can't, but it's a tough thing to count on.
You're not gonna feel good about it. So we'll see. And then all that to say on top of every single thing, which don't worry, this isn't gonna lead to a universe of conversation. Everything basically centers on Matthews being healthy. If he's healthy, I actually think they're a tad underrated right now. Like if we get healthy, good Austin Matthews, I think people are actually a little bit disconnected from how good the team is. Like they're good on defense, they have good goalies. I think that they have a number of like useful NHL forwards and good useful NHL forwards that they could figure out. It's all irrelevant if Matthews is not healthy. Like if he's plays like he did last year, it's not gonna be great. But if he's healthy and good, I think they're a bit better than people think that they are.
Yeah, I mean, I think 60 goal Matthews plus competent defense plus above average goaltending, you don't actually need the rest of your forward group to be elite. And then
And they're deeper though. And they're
you
deeper.
sprinkle a Nylander in there, you sprinkle a Nick Waugh in there, kind of lengthening it out. Yeah, I mean, I'm not being like I'm crazy optimistic. This is the year the Stanley
Yeah,
Cup is
no.
coming home, but I know what you mean. Like when they lose a player like Marner and they don't add a big name impact player, I think people assume like, okay, here comes the edge of the cliff. And a big difference between the loss of Marner and the players who are going to replace him in his various roles could be filled by Matthews returning to being Matthews.
And he'll drag a line mate along easily. Like we're not gonna have to
And
worry
he
about
might
Max
have
Domi
to.
or
Who
Michelli
knows?
or whatever,
Yeah, he
right?
might
Yeah,
have
he
to.
might have to. So we'll see. But yeah, it feels like some moves are to come. I'm sure we'll do an episode if they do. We never got to the Mitch Marner stuff. Maybe for the best. I don't know. But it's a long summer, so we'll see how it plays out.
All right, that feels like a good place to leave it. We really appreciate when you guys listen. We appreciate even more when you leave ratings, reviews, things that help us grow the show. And we will be back at some point as things happen here in the summer.